Are you guys excited for the Rinderknech Vacherot Shanghai Masters 1000 final? The fall season is amazing. A lot of people tend to tune out after the US Open, but there's a lot of great tennis to be played still this year and a lot of great tournaments going on. And certainly, Vacherot facing Rinderknech in the final of Shanghai is one of the best stories of 2025. These guys are cousins, and it goes even a little bit deeper than that because if you look at their game styles, they're very similar. Also, the way the genetics turned out with these two players, also a lot of similarities. Both guys are tall and lean, and both guys play similarly. Of course, not the same. There are some differences. I'm going to tap into them in today's video. But one thing that's very interesting to me is the similarities on the serve and the unorthodoxies on their serves. If you remember writing Söderling, I'm seeing a lot of similarities in both the Vacherot and the Rinderknech serve regarding the way they toss the ball up and the way they load. So they have what I call the forward toss. So the most commonly used toss is the diagonal toss, and then closely followed by the parallel toss. And very few players will have their arm go forward into the court as they toss the ball. Now, it is more tricky to load, not impossible. You can initiate the coil later, especially if you serve with a lag. It's going to give you more time to get into that loading position. But interestingly, both Vacherot and Rinderknech don't coil a lot on their serve. Now, this is a serve that you most commonly see on the WTA Tour. And despite these unorthodoxies, the serve is one of the biggest weapons in both of these guys' game. Now, another French player that has a very similar serve is Alice. So French players, very interesting to watch. And tomorrow's final is going to be super fun. You got to tune in. A lot of people are ridiculing this final and calling it a joke, a challenger final. Please give these guys respect. Rinderknech has been on absolute fire this entire year. And Vacherot delivered one of the most inspiring performances that I've ever seen at the Masters 1000 level. He came to Shanghai without even being in a quali draw, being ranked 204. He wanted to play challengers. And then a bunch of players pulled out and he was able to get into the draw. And he comes all the way from the qualies to the final, beating unbelievable players, including the GOAT. So, in the first semifinal match between Djokovic and Vacherot, Djokovic started strong, getting the early break, then interestingly immediately losing his serve. And what was so fascinating in this match is that Vacherot was outplaying Djokovic from the baseline in the backhand to backhand exchanges. Now, this of course had to do with Djokovic's injury, which I'm going to talk about in a second. But even very early in the match, Vacherot was holding his own from the baseline. And at 2-all, Djokovic hurt himself. He did something back here, lower back, or maybe the hip. Something was hurting him really badly. And that, of course, affected his defensive abilities on the backhand side. And he wasn't playing well off the backhand corner, and he was in a lot of pain. He got a medical timeout at 4-3 Vacherot with Djokovic serving. And I felt that his movement actually got worse after the medical timeout. He ended up losing that first at 6-3. Now, I'm sure that he got pain medication and it took a while for it to kick in. And then in the second set, Djokovic was actually able to play and he was fighting like crazy. And I'll talk about the second set in a minute. But first, I do want to address the awful comments and the disrespect that Novak Djokovic receives anytime that he's injured. And I need to address this because it's absolutely ridiculous. First of all, if you use common sense, why would Novak Djokovic take a medical timeout to gain an advantage when he's serving down 3-4? What does he want to achieve? Lose his serve by taking a medical timeout? So it makes absolutely no sense. And if you're accusing Novak Djokovic of faking and being tired, he was vomiting on the court this week. And obviously, being 38 years old in these conditions, he is going to struggle big time. So put some respect on the GOAT's name. If you also look at how much respect Djokovic receives from the other players, you know that this guy is a class act. Not only the older generation that was there before Djokovic, Djokovic's generation, and the generation now, they all respect him and all acknowledge him as the greatest player of all time. A couple of weeks ago, Niki Pilic died, and I made a tribute video to him. I regard him as one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he has been a huge inspiration to my coaching journey. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you guys know that Novak Djokovic in his teenage years went to the Nikki Pilic Tennis Academy. But what you might not know is that when Djokovic initially went there at 13 years old, the Nikki Pilic Tennis Academy in Munich was regarded as one of the best tennis academies in Europe. But unfortunately, a couple of years later, the academy was struggling. There were some things going on financially, and there weren't a lot of players there. But Novak Djokovic remained loyal to Nikki and stayed there and was almost there completely by himself. And Novak Djokovic went to Nikki's funeral shortly prior to leaving for the tournament in Shanghai. And he is one of the few players that I know of who acknowledges the coaches that helped him when he was very young. And what happens a lot of times at the pro level is that the developmental coaches who help players very early on are often forgotten. They receive no credit. Nobody knows their names. And the big time coaches often get all the credit after the development has already been done. But in Novak Djokovic's case, whether it's Jelena Gencic, who was Djokovic's first coach, Novak was always crediting her as one of the most important coaches that he's ever had. And Novak has been so respectful to Nikki Pilic. He regards him as his tennis father. Now, it goes deeper than that. Novak Djokovic will never talk about how much he's helped other players in Serbia financially and in many other ways. The other players always talk about how generous Novak Djokovic is. So I just told you a couple of things about Novak Djokovic as a human being. And do you think someone like that has the need to cheat and pretend to be injured and to fake being tired and to fake injuries? I am so sick and tired of seeing these comments online. They're so disrespectful. They're slanderous. I do believe that he deserves the ATP Sportsmanship Award at least once before he retires. It's not fair that he hasn't received that award yet. Now, I know that you're going to say that he screams at his box and he throws his rackets, but he's always a class act at the net. He respects his opponents, and he's, in my opinion, one of the fairest and most sportsmanlike players on tour. Now, where people get confused is Novak Djokovic's ability to recover in matches. And Novak Djokovic will utilize all the things that are available to him to recover in a match. So maybe you saw him dunking his face in cold water. He will use ice towels. He will also take painkillers. And there's been several matches, for example, at Roland Garros in 2024 or at the Australian Open in 2025, where the painkillers kicked in a little bit later and Novak Djokovic was struggling at first and then started moving more freely. And that certainly was the case at this match as well. After not being able to move at all at the end of the first set, in the second set, Djokovic was fighting. Now, he was still struggling physically, just like he did in many of the other matches this week. He was gassed after rallies, going down to his knees. And at 4-all in the second set, I was so impressed with Vacherot because Novak Djokovic, after a spectacular point serving at 4-all, 30-all, got the crowd to his side. He did one of these, and the whole arena was going crazy. And that was a difficult moment for Vacherot, but he bounced back so well and ended up breaking Novak Djokovic and was serving for the match up 6-3, 5-4. And this game got very complicated because Novak Djokovic was fighting. And Vacherot did show some nerves and started missing some backhands. Now, like I said in the beginning, he was dominating Djokovic from the baseline, especially in backhand exchanges. But in the game where he was serving for the match, he did miss a couple of backhands and gave Djokovic break point. But Vacherot, just like through the entirety of this tournament, was so unbelievably clutch and so focused in the most important stages of these matches. And in this particular game, down break point, he played so solid, serving well, hitting his forehand well. And he came to the net 13 times in this match and won 11 points. So he was excellent at the net as well and ended up winning the second set 6-4. Now, one more thing about Djokovic. It is clear that he's putting himself in a lot of pain and suffering playing these tournaments at the age of 38. And this tournament reminded me a little bit of Jimmy Connor's 1991 US Open run, where Jimmy Connors made it to the semifinal, playing some unbelievable tennis, and then he was completely gassed in the semifinals against Courier. And I'm seeing a lot of this with Novak Djokovic as well. At the age of 38, he makes the semis, but in many of these tournaments, in the semis, he is completely gassed. His body is spent, and he has nothing left. You can see that he's still fighting. The game has absolutely not passed him by. He's still the old Novak Djokovic regarding his mental strength, regarding his skill set on the court, but it's just that Father Time is catching up with him, and physically, he's not the same player that he was. He simply gets gassed out towards the late stages of tournaments. But it goes a little bit deeper than that. We're now seeing that Novak Djokovic is getting injured more and more. And of course, with age, there are going to be more physical problems in addition to him being exhausted. So a lot of people are asking themselves, why is he doing this? He's regarded as the GOAT. He's won every tournament there is to win. But my theory is that during the Big Three era, the two most popular tennis players in the history of tennis were Nadal and Roger Federer. There's no doubt in my mind that this is true. And I do believe that now Novak Djokovic is enjoying a lot more support from the crowd, even in the Sinner Alcaraz era. Also, two very popular players, but in many of the matches, the crowd, when Djokovic plays either against Sinner or Alcaraz, is on his side. And for the first time in his career, doesn't matter where he steps on the court, he's getting a lot of support. He, of course, enjoys the competition, but in my opinion, what's driving him and motivating him to keep playing, possibly until 2028, is the crowd support that he's receiving pretty much anywhere where he steps foot on the tennis court. And now let's transition to the second semifinal between Rinderknech and Medvedev. And Medvedev has been playing a lot better in the last two tournaments. He's made two consecutive semifinals. And those are great results because Medvedev has been struggling this entire year. He did play well in Indian Wells, reaching the semifinals there. A very entertaining match in the quarters against Arthur Fils. And also, he made the finals in Halle. But other than that, there has been a lot of disappointing results from Medvedev, especially at the Grand Slam level. And of course, there was the disaster at the US Open. Now, Medvedev did get rid of his entire team, and he's got a new team. And what's so interesting about coaching changes is that it's not necessarily that Medvedev is going to start doing things differently, but just to hear a fresh voice can be very motivating, because what happens often in tennis coaching is that these player-coach relationships can get stale after a while. Just think of hearing the same things for many, many years. Yes, there are some player-coach relationships that can last throughout the entire career of a player, but most commonly the magic can disappear after many years of working together the same way and the player hearing the same thing. So the new coach comes in and all of a sudden there's something different, and this can have a very positive effect on the player. And I do believe that that's what is happening with Medvedev now. And it was nice to see him play well against Lerner Tien. I think that was a very important match for Medvedev because he lost to Tien a couple of times before. And I did expect both Djokovic and Medvedev to win these matches. I'm not going to lie to you. And I was very surprised that both of them lost. But you got to give credit to Rinderknech, who, very similar to Vacherot, was serving incredibly well, coming into the net a lot, even more than Vacherot, and winning a lot of points up there. But Medvedev had this match. He won the first set 6-4 and then lost his first service game in the second set. But interestingly, he had so many opportunities to get the break back in the second set, and he couldn't capitalize on any of the break chances. He ends up losing that second set 6-2. Now in the third set, Medvedev has a break point at 3-all, Rinderknech serving. And what does Rinderknech do? He does the Bublik slice ace to the ad side down the tee. Medvedev on the next point hits a forehand cross-court return winner. Now he has the second break point. And again, Rinderknech hits that Bublik ace, a slice serve to the ad side down the tee, and saves both break points with clean aces. Now both players hold, and Rinderknech very impressively holds to love at 4-all. And now Medvedev is serving at 4-5, trying to stay in the match. And Rinderknech plays a good return game and has match point 30-40. Medvedev misses the first serve and delivers an insane second serve at 207 kilometers an hour and makes it. Rinderknech misses the return. Now, Rinderknech has another match point, and Medvedev again misses the first serve and goes hard again on the second, but this time he double faults. So I do think that he pushed his luck a little bit there, trying to hit that second serve hard 2 times in a row. I was very surprised because I categorized that as a tactical error. I do think he should have kicked that second serve in and got into a rally. But nevertheless, Rinderknech played an amazing match. Played the big points better than Medvedev, no doubt about it, saving all these break points in both the second set and the third set. And now we get two cousins in the final. Who would have expected that? I have absolutely no idea who's going to take this one. Like I said in the beginning, these guys play a very similar game. What I find very impressive with Vacherot is how strong he is physically. So he's a very complete player, has a very solid forehand. I do believe that his backhand is better. He can make power with the backhand, but also he plays very good defense on the backhand. Maybe not necessarily having the ability to hit winners with the two-hander like Djokovic, Sinner, or Alcaraz, but he manipulates the ball from defensive positions with that backhand. And if the other player comes in, he can get that ball very low to the opponent's feet. So the backhand is very good offensively and defensively. He can come to the net. He serves exceptionally well. And most importantly, he is very clutch and very fit. He didn't show any signs of physical problems, which is quite unbelievable because he came from the qualies and he is playing under the same conditions as everybody else. And he is definitely beating a lot of these guys physically.